Hey there, welcome to the continuation of this Nguro review series. We're going to be discussing Rogue now. I'm pretty excited about Rogue because I'm a huge fan of the class. One of my favorite classes, and I think there's a lot of interesting stuff that's being released in this set for Rogue. I don't know how good it is. We're going to have to wait and see, but even if this set doesn't bring forward the new archetypes that maybe Blizzard are interested in Rogue, I think we're still going to see Miracle Rogue being a thing even after the Hall of Faming of Conceal. Okay, so let's talk about Rogue. And as per usual, I'm going to give normal disclaimers. This is before the set comes out. This is pure sort of speculation. And we're going to give cards ratings out of 5 for viability and flavor. And as per usual, we are going to start with the quest. So Rogue's quest is called The Caverns Below. The quest is to play 4 minions with the same name, and the reward is the Crystal Core. So Crystal Core is a 5-mana spell. So a 5-mana spell that turns all your minions into 5/5s. So the way I believe this works is that for the rest of the game, your minions are 5/5s. The way I believe this works is that's essentially their base stat line. So you can buff things after Crystal Core, but if they yeah, so the effect happens. So it reads here the effect happens to minions which are played and summoned. For example, frogs and sheep from Hex and Polymorph would become 5/5s. So that's the turn you play Crystal Core, I believe. So if they Hex stuff afterwards, then that would go back to being a 0/1. So I think the idea with this deck is to have a lot of cheap minions that when they become 5/5s are extremely valuable, especially stuff with charge. I think this is going to be a pretty aggressive deck that it takes to make Crystal Core viable. I'm a huge fan of the flavor of the quest condition for Crystal Core, or for the Caverns Below, being that you have to play 4 minions with the same name, right? Which is weird, because you can only put 2 minions with the same name in your deck in Hearthstone. So you need to Shadow Step, or Youthful Brewmaster, or do something like that on your minions to actually get them back in your hand to fulfill that condition. If we take a look first of all at this deck I have prepared on the right hand side, this is a deck meant to fulfill the quest. You can see it has double Shadow Step, 1 Youthful Brewmaster, and a lot of cards that are valuable cards like with Battle Cries and stuff like that, or with charge. So stuff like Novice Engineers, where it draws you a card, helps you get towards the sort of combo pieces you need to put together the finish. Also, if you Shadow Step Novice Engineers, that helps you draw into your other Shadow Step to make your Novice Engineers work, and you can combine that with Useful Brewmaster, so you can go like Novice Engineer, Shadow Step, play your Novice Engineer, play a Youthful Brewmaster, bounce your Novice Engineer, play it again, and then when you draw your other Novice Engineer, boom, you're done the quest. So there's some pretty ridiculous speed at which you can finish this quest. Obviously, this is a quest that is better the earlier you finish it, because 5/5s don't scale. That was my first concern with the quest is, okay, I don't really want 5/5s past turn 5, but if I can make it so that I can draw enough cheap things that are 5/5s, then maybe it's worth it. And one of the other tricks is Violet Teacher. Violet Teacher will spawn 5/5 tokens, basically, the way I understand it, so that's a very powerful effect. So what we've gone with here is a deck that is all about getting out these minions. This is Patch's deck, as we see. Patches is probably always going to die a long time before you complete the Caverns Below, but it is a very useful effect to help you get control of the board early, so that you're not just overrun on board by the time you actually complete Caverns Below. We've also got Swashbucklers, a very good minion to bounce again, because you get value every time you play it on its battle cry, helps get the patches out. And we've also got South Sea Deckhands with the rogue weapon up. They have charge, which means in the late game, as 5/5 charges, they're pretty strong for 1 mana. And in the early game, they are good for fighting for the board, getting patches out, And there are possible Shadow Step targets as well, but you do kind of just end up pushing them face most of the time. Otherwise, if you trade them, you won't be able to Shadow Step them. Obviously, we also have Backstabs just for tempo, pretty standard card in Rogue. Prep, mostly to use with stuff like Eviscerates and Mimic Pod, which we'll discuss just now. And also to help get token generation for Violet Teacher, and largely for the single sprint that's in the deck. This is not a Gadget Sand style Miracle deck, so it needs some card draw outside of that, and sprint is probably one of the best ways for an aggressive deck like this to refill. We've also got cards like Thalnos, just more card draw, and in the late game, obviously being a 2-mana 5/5 is pretty decent. The spell power is pretty effective as well. Argent Horse Rider, always a great minion to Shadow Step, because you can play it, trade into something with 2 health, Shadow Step it, play it again, kill another thing with 2 health, and against possibly the Hunter decks we might see, or Zoo and stuff, that's a pretty powerful effect. Edwin, obviously, when you're doing all the Shadow Stepping, makes stuff cheap. There's going to be some crazy Edwin turns that you can get off, and that's going to be a very powerful effect towards winning the game. Edwin would have base stats of 5/5, and would still get +2/+2 for each time you combo him. So if you, after playing Crystal Core, you play spell or minion Edwin, Edwin would be a 9/9. So that's a pretty powerful. Edwin gets better with the quest. And then we also have SI7 Agent, another decent minion for bouncing, and a good way to take control of the board. I mean, this deck is all about controlling the board and getting a lot of value from returning minions to your hand and playing them again. And then we just have Violet Teacher, Zaryl. Zaryl can give you the Toxin that can return cards to your hand, which is a powerful reason to have him in the deck, to be honest. And he also gives you spells to synergize with Violet Teachers, Thalnos, and cards like that. Also, I mean, he's a 4-mana 5/5 with Death Rattle and Battle Cry. It's very unlikely you're ever going to activate the quest from playing Zaryl 4 times. You would have to get extra copies of Shadow Step or something like that in order to do that, or get the Shadow Step potion from Zaryl. But the fact that Zaryl can give you the Shadow Step type potion or Shadow Step Toxin is a very, very powerful effect. It can also help to stealth minions like Violet Teacher to give you a big turn where you can generate a lot of value with it. And we have Vilespine Slayer. Another reason to play Zaryl is to help activate this card. I'm gonna come back to, well, actually, I think we can rate this quest now. We can break from tradition and rate this quest, based purely on a deck like this. I'd say this quest is probably about a 3 for playability and a 5 for flavor. I think that it is going to be questionable if this deck is actually any good, but I think it's definitely going to be a lot of fun to play, and it's one of the decks I'm going to jump on playing straight away when the expansion comes out, to be honest. Okay, and then there's 2 other new cards that we've seen in this deck. Firstly, let's start with Vilespine Slayer. This is probably the best, if not the top 2 best cards in the set here for Rogue. It is a 5-mana 3/4 minion, and it has combo Destroy a Minion. So this is straight up hard removal, assassinate with a body, only on the condition that you combo it. So this is part of the reason it's in the deck with alongside Shadow Steps, Backstabs, Preps, and a lot of these cheap minions that you're going to see, where Vilespine Slayer is a huge tempo swing when you play it and actually get to kill a minion. You get a 3/4 body and you get to kill a minion, which is a very powerful effect for Rogue that can sometimes sort of not have ways to deal with minions post, let's say, using 2 saps. I mean, in this quest deck, we've even dropped sap because Vilespine Slayer is kind of a better sap in that it actually just kills the minion a lot of the time. So unless it's Death Rattles, that's going to be a better effect for you a lot of the time. So I think Vilespine Slayer I'm going to give a 5 for playability. I think it's a very good card. I think it should be a very powerful card going forward for Rogue, unless the meta is too fast that Vilespine Slayer is not actually getting enough value. I think that's the big weakness of Vilespine Slayer, is that it struggles in a very, very fast meta. Next we have, oh, and for flavor, I'm going to give it a 5 also. I mean, I just really like it. So, yeah, two thumbs up, 5 out of 5 for Vilespine Slayer. And then we're going to talk about the other card that was in the deck, and that's Mimic Pod. So Mimic Pod is a 3-mana spell for Rogue. It reads draw a card, then add a copy of it to your hand. So drawing cards is very powerful in Rogue, and adding another copy means that if you draw Shadow Step, you get another copy of it. If you draw one of the minions, like Swashbuckler or something like that, then you get another copy of it. And this is another reason that Prep was in the Quest deck, because Preparation is very good with 3-mana cost spells. Obviously, reducing the cost of spells by 3 means you can Preparation, Mimic Pod, and play like Edwin on turn 3, right? You get a 6/6 Edwin, you get 2 cards from your deck, so you're replacing both the Prep and the Mimic Pod in a way. And getting extra copies of cards at this cost is really good for the quest, and yeah, it's a pretty strong effect. I mean, it's kind of like an Arcane Intellect for Rogue, but a little bit weaker because you don't get the choices. But when it comes to the quest, it's a bit stronger than Arcane Intellect. So I'm a huge fan of Mimic Pod. I think that Mimic Pod is going to be playable even outside of the quest deck. That's how I think it's pretty good. I think it and Vilespine Slayer are probably easily the best cards in Rogue for this set. So I'm going to give Mimic Pod a 5 for playability as well. I'm going to give it a 4 for playability because there are occasions where you draw super clunky things like Gadgetzan, and you need to put it in a deck where there aren't too many clunky things for you to draw. And it is a lot of the time you're going to have to prep it out, and then that is a really slow use of preparation rather than in some sort of tempo swinging turn. And for flavor, I'm going to give it a 5. I absolutely love the card, and I'm really hoping it is playable. Even have it in the Miracle Rogue deck that we'll discuss a bit afterwards. And then next we may as well discuss the Rogue Legendary. Sherazan Corpse Flower. It's a 4-mana 5/3 minion with Death Rattle go dormant. Play 4 cards in a turn to revive this minion. So basically it turns into a token on the board that is completely uninteractive because, you know, Rogue are known for being fun and uninteractive. And whenever you cast 4 spells in a turn, it'll revive itself. So the theme here is relatively evident in a lot of these plant-themed cards that Rogue has, and the idea is that you are supposed to spam out a bunch of cheap things, ideally things you generate from other cards, so you don't have to play 4 cards from your deck in a turn in order to revive Sherazan. I think Sherazan might be a bit surprising. I don't think it's good. I think 5/3 body is too awkward, too easy to kill, but I think it might be able to draw a lot of resources out of your opponent. I just don't see the deck that has enough things to repeatedly do this. I think you need to get Sherazan 3 times resurrected in order for it to be good enough value, and I don't quite see the deck that can do that reliably. So I'm going to give Sherazan a 3 for playability. I think that it could well surprise us. I'm going to give it a 5 for flavor. I really love this idea and the interesting direction they're taking Rogue cards, rather than just being like, here, try be Control Rogue. Control Rogue's not a thing, Blizzard. We can't do that. So yeah, I like the way they're doing this. It's very sort of tempo oriented, and that is traditionally what, you know, Rogues have been all about. Next we have Biteweed, another plant-themed card. And it is a 2-mana 1/1 with combo gain +1/+1 for each of the card you've played this turn. So it's like a mini Edwin, but it only gives +1/+1. So you have to spend, let's say, 3 cards to play a 2-mana 5/5. So you'd have to prep a spell, backstab, and then you can Biteweed as a 2-mana 5/5. Yeah. I don't think Biteweed is good enough. I think that Questing Adventurer is just better, and a lot of the time you probably just want to play Questing Adventurer in your deck because you don't have to commit the turn you play it. One of the nicest things about Questing sometimes over Edwin is that you can play Questing and just do a little bit, prep another spell, play another spell you're going to play anyway, leave the Questing out, which they have to deal with, and if they can't or don't deal with it, then you can really punish them the following turn. And that's one of the big things about Questing that makes it sort of better than Biteweed in this scenario if we're going to compare the two. Obviously, losing Conceal is going to be awkward for questing in Rogue, and maybe we see Biteweed played instead of questing. But I think it takes a lot of spells to make Biteweed big enough to be really worth it. So I'm going to give Biteweed a 2 for playability and a 4 for flavor. Even though it's kind of like a mini Edwin, it is nice once again that they're going with this play lots of cards in a turn theme. And they've made it cheap so that you can get decent tempo out of it. So yeah, I like Biteweed, but I don't think it's going to be good enough. Next we have Obsidian Shard. This is a 4 mana 3/3 weapon, costs 1 less for each card you've played from another class. So this is there to reward the Burgle-esque rogues for stealing cards from your opponent's classes. It can be a cheap weapon in the late game, but most of the time I'd rather just play Deadly Poison for 1 less charge. Most of the time, as a 3 mana 3/3 weapon, you would play this, but whether you can get it to be 3 mana on the turn, on like turn 3, which is when you really want to play a 3 mana 3/3 weapon, I don't know. You'd have to get a really cheap spell from a Swashbuckler on turn 1, play that spell on turn 2, and then play Obsidian Shard. And I think that situation is going to be minimal enough that I don't think Obsidian Shard is going to be good enough to be playable. I think it is great in certain tempo decks, but a 3/3 weapon is something that's only really something you want early. I mean, we look at stuff like Fiery War Axe, it's so much better than Eaglehorn Bow, even though Eaglehorn Bow can gain extra charges, because Fiery War Axe comes down on turn 2, when that 3 damage is a lot more relevant. So the later Obsidian Shard comes down, the weaker it is. Obviously, it can come down in one huge tempo swing turn, and I think that's the direction they're trying to take Rogue. The idea that you sort of hold out, and then go for some big tempo play to swing the board. You resurrect your Sherazin, you play Obsidian Shard, you clear their stuff, and you play like a Biteweed, and wow, okay, you've got this huge board out of nowhere, you flip the board, and I think that's an interesting mechanic. I definitely want to fiddle with some tempo rogues that are non-quest based and non-miracle based rogues after the expansion launches. But I'm not sure Obsidian Shard's going to be good enough. I think it's very conditional on that deck being good enough, so I'm going to give it a 2 for playability and a 5 for flavor. I might be a little biased on these numbers I'm giving rogue cards for flavor, but I really like this sort of style of rogue that they're trying to go for, and I think it's going to be pretty interesting. Next we have Envenom Weapon. So 3 mana spell, give your weapon poisonous. So poisonous means that whenever it deals damage to a minion, it destroys it. Problem being, rogues don't have heal, so it's very difficult for them to actually recover if they're hitting big minions, which is what you need to make Envenom valuable. The synergy with Envenom would be something like Violet Illusionist, which makes your hero immune on your turn. Very strong in Arena, but not really doing an Arena review here. I don't really think Envenom Weapon is going to be good enough in Constructed. I think most of the time you'd rather just play Assassinate or Vilespine Slayer and pay a little bit more mana and not have to use your health as a resource to kill their big things. So I'm going to give Envenom Weapon a 1 for playability and a 3 for flavor. Like, poisoning your daggers is entirely what Rogue is kind of known for doing in like World of Warcraft and other games like that. So I think it makes a lot of sense in terms of flavor. Next we have Razor Petal Lasher. It's a 2 mana 2/2 with Battle Cry. Add a Razor Petal to your hand that deals 1 damage. So the Razor Petals are 1 mana spells that deal 1 damage, which is a bad spell. First I thought Razor Petals might be 0 mana, and then I was like, okay, this card's pretty good. And then I realized they're just 1 mana, and that's just bad. But obviously we get the idea they're going here with this plant theme I was talking about, where you can go Razor Petal Lasher, play your 1 cost spell, your Razor Petal that you get, and then play something else, and then you still have to play 1 more thing, and then you can resurrect Sherazin. That's the idea they're going with here, definitely on the sort of plant theme, is that the more things you do in a turn, the better they are, and this is one way of facilitating that, requiring playing multiple cards in a turn. So Razor Petal Lasher, I'm going to give a 1 for playability, don't think it's a good card. A 4 for flavor. I think they could have done a better job on their design to make it a bit more playable. That's why I'm underrating on flavorability. But obviously I like the playing more cards in effect that we've mentioned before. Then we have Razor Petal Volley. It's a 2 mana spell, add 2 razor petals to your hand that deal 1 damage. So the spell does nothing when you play it, just adds 2 cards to your hand. So on turn 4, turn 3, well, I don't know. Once Sherazin is dead, you can play this, the 2 razor petals that come out of it, and 1 other spell, and then you can resurrect Sherazin. So I mean, I feel like Razor Petal Volley is entirely there meant to be there to facilitate Sherazin. Yeah, with Malygos, well, with Thorison rotating out, I don't think Malygos Rogue is going to be viable. Otherwise, this could be an interesting way of facilitating Malygos Rogue, allowing you to get more individual spells that deal damage, which obviously synergizes well with Malygos. Next we have Hallucination, which is a 1 mana. Oh, so Razor Petal Volley, I'm going to give a 1 for playability. I don't think it's good at all. Actually, 0 for playability. I think it's trash. And a 2 for flavor, just because I think it's so trash. Obviously, I like the mechanic, but I don't like the Razor Petals or the fact that this card does nothing when you play it. And then lastly, we have Hallucination. It's a 1 mana rogue spell, and it reads discover a card from your opponent's class. So I'm a huge fan of the discover mechanic. And obviously, this is like a discoverable swashbuckler effect without the body. The body is pretty important for Rogue. For getting that 1/1 on board helps you use your dagger to trade more effectively on turn 2. Obviously, bringing out patches is a big plus for Swashbuckler. So I don't think this will compete with Swashbuckler. I think Rogues were willing to take the worse RNG to play this. This might be something playable in a deck with Gadget Sand to draw on a turn or something. But I don't think Hallucination is going to be playable enough. I do like the effect. I like the discovering mechanic, so I'm going to give this a 2 for playability, and a 4 for flavor. So overall, you can see I'm a big fan of a lot of what they're trying to do with Rogue, but I'm not sure if they're actually going to succeed in this quest Rogue, this sort of tempo board flipping Rogue that they're sort of hinting at. That tempo Rogue is a deck I really want to try out. We see on the left here, I have a Miracle Rogue deck, sort of what I think Miracle Rogue might look like after the expansion. So with Tomb Pillagers rotating out, and Conceal going into Hall of Fame, I've gone with some other cheaper spells like Deadly Poison coming back into the deck, Mimic Pod to help create extra value, Zarol to help generate some cheap spells, and Burgly Bully I think is going to be a big part of Rogue in the future, being a way to generate coins. You can coin Bully on 4 or play Bully on 5. It's kind of like a slower version of the Tomb Pillager. Most of the time you're expecting to get 1 coin from it as long as you are still on board to a certain extent. We also see SI7 agents returning just to make sure that you actually have the board by the time you play Bully, which is really important because you need to force your opponent to remove Bully with spells. Then we see the Valspine Slayers, just a great tempo removal tool. Allows the rogue to keep eviscerates for use on the face to sort of help facilitate lethal damage. And with so many cheap things like double counterfeit coins and stuff like that, I think that Valspine Slayer might be a very good value card for Rogue. And then obviously we see the 2 Gadget Sands to go with all the spells and coins and whatnot that we're generating in this deck as a hand refill mechanic. So this is maybe how Miracle Rogue looks like going forward. We see it's dropped the questing package, so its potential damage is a lot lower, but I think questing becomes a bit iffy without the conceal as an option. We'll have to see. I also kind of just dropped it because I wanted to put in Mimic Pods and Valspine Slayers. They might, in the end, not make the cut in Rogue. I think the 4 slots is going to be an issue going forward for Miracle Rogue. Only really having Zarol, which is a legendary and therefore difficult to run. And I think that losing those questings is going to be an issue in terms of having enough damage going forward to finish off the game, basically. So yeah, that's maybe how Miracle Rogue might look. A little bit more tempo orientated, rather than having this super huge bursts. Obviously, in this list might probably missing patches as well, to be honest. But I couldn't quite fit it in with the Mimic Pods and stuff like that. Might end up cussing stuff like SI7 agents for stuff like patches. Yeah. So that's how Miracle Rogue might look going forward. Overall, I'm probably overly optimistic about Rogue. I think it's going to be a lot better than a more objective person might think. I think I'm very excited to play Rogue. Probably the number one class I'm excited to play. Other than like, I'm very interested to see what comes up with the Mage OTK Time Warp decks, and very interested to see how Hunter pans out. Just because I'm maybe a little bit worried about that. But Rogue is the class I'm most interested in, purely mechanic-wise. I mean, you saw I gave a lot of these cards high marks for flavor, so I'm very interested to see how Rogue is going forward. But yeah, that's enough about Rogue. I could probably sit here and talk for like an hour or more about Rogue. But yeah, please like, subscribe, follow, do all those things that help us allow the channel to grow, and let me know if you think I'm completely wrong on Rogue, or if you completely hate the flavor of Rogue. Maybe you don't think that the new direction they're taking Rogue is that interesting. Maybe, you know, let me know. Or if you think I've completely underrated the Razor Petals, for instance, let me know on Twitter or in the YouTube channel, YouTube comments or anything like that. Thanks, and see you for the next video.